Today, we're looking at a black ink by Monteverde Document Black. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. There's timestamps down below where you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Now, you can follow me on Instagram as an ink guy, and if you like fountain pen ink reviews, don't forget to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then inked up this Italics brand Chaplin's tankards with an oblique italic nib. I wrote with it for the day. I then used it to take the notes for this video. In order to have some standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I do test other papers, but those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial, something like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub. No feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. Medium is slightly darker than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. You see the scrubby of the medium does show some color variation. The scrubby of the extra fine does show some, but we're really not getting it right here. Tomoe River, no bleeding, normal Tomoe River, ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 11 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 15 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no color variation, and there is none. Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It has shade spots as in it has some darker areas, like the B and the K in black are darker. The D in document, quite a bit darker. Extra fine, slightly lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and it is shading. Brown starts dark and gets light. Fox starts dark, gets light, gets dark. Over starts light and gets dark, 8 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, and yes, it does offer some shading. Quick starts darker, gets a little lighter, gets darker. I don't get why it's very... Over starts lighter, gets darker, 11 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both do show us some color variation, far left to far right, and it is there in the writing. Why? I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And it's interesting because it's such a consistent layer of that dark gray all the way up. It doesn't start darker and get lighter or start lighter and gets darker. It's consistent all the way through. So that just means as it's moving, it's bonding with the paper all the way up. Now the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and almost all of that ink has completely bonded into place on that filter paper. Barely any is moved where what looks like it's kind of wet is really just the tiniest bit of gray that's managed to move. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, you have no fear using this in a note-taking situation if you want to go back and highlight, because it's not afraid of being re-wet. Looking at the water reaffirms that. You see that water only barely started to move, a tiny bit of it, and not very much at all. Pen Flesh had a lot of the same problem. It's really not moving this ink. It's bonded to that paper. 1/3 bleach solution? Ha! No, we see the spot where it was down, but it's really not breaking it free. All that this means is test this in a more inexpensive pen, before you go straight after your expensive pens. But to be clear, despite how bonded with the paper it is, I had no trouble getting this out of either the Pilot Metropolitan or the Italics, or the Mr. Pen, the Italics Chaplin's Tankard with the Italics oblique nib. I didn't have any trouble getting it out of either of those. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Now I'm going to link a video where I show how I test it and how I calculate the data. Monteverde's Document Black has a viscosity of 1.33, making this a very wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those. Now, for the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Monteverde's Document Black has an average dry time of 10 seconds, making this a faster drying ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Monteverde's Document Black, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. So I went with a nice red, because I really don't like this as a black ink. I chose Diamine Matador, so that at least one of the inks on the page will look nice. The second writing sample is done on Apica CD, black and red, and Franklin Christoph paper. Here we're looking at the Apica CD notebook. Now we get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is ever so slightly lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. Yes, it does have shading. Over starts lighter, gets darker. The starts lighter, gets darker. Brown starts darker, gets lighter. Quick goes dark, lighter, darker. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, and unfortunately, yes, shading. Quick, it goes from dark to light to dark. Brown goes from darker to lighter. Fox goes from lighter to darker. Over, lighter to darker. 8 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both, looking far left to far right. Yes, there's shading because there's shading in the writing. I'm sorry. Black and red notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter most of the time than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. Yes, it has shading. I'm sorry. Brown goes dark to light. Quick goes dark to light to dark. I hate that it shades and they call themselves black. 3 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shading. Thank you. Now be black. But 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine, far left to far right, shows some color variation, and there was some. Medium showed none, and there was none. Last up is Franklin Christoph. Now I had the note where I know I had to do this because I do get spots where it's bleeding deeper in, but not anywhere near bleeding through. But it's definitely getting deep in the page with the stub, and with the extra fine, not so bad with the medium. As far as ghosting, there's the ever slightest, but it's really not too bad. It shouldn't stop you from using the back of the page. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 2 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 3 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no color variation. Finally, we didn't get any. And that is all that I have for the writing samples. Thank you for being over. So what do I think of Monteverde's Document Black? It's much more of a gray than it is a black, but it is ridiculously permanent on the paper. It does seem to sometimes have the slightest bit of shading, which I don't care for in black inks, but then again, it does come across as much more of a dark gray. So what pen and nib is going to give the best writing experience with this ink? Considering that it's a legal ink that you would use for signing documents where you worry about something being changed, really any nib would work, but I would probably go with a wet fine to try and get as dark a line as possible. If you've enjoyed this video and made it this far, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down and tell me why. Thanks for watching.